Last week you said that the systems didn't fail, the systems were bypassed. But today the narrative seemed to contradict that, and you seem to have accepted that today. Do you accept that statement you gave last week was, misguided?
No, I don't. And don't put words in my mouth, Mark. Don't do that. Okay? I'm engaging in this in an open fashion. Don't put words in my mouth.
I'm sure that's verbatim what you said last week.
Don't put words in my mouth. What I've just said to Matty is exactly what I said last week. The systems were robust, but they were circumvented by a criminal actor. So please don't put words in my mouth. I want to just express at the outset my dismay at the further information that has been shared with the court this morning, which of course adds to what we learnt last Monday, and to express my horror at the contents of the material that has been set out. It is clear that there has been a colossal breach of trust and a systematic series of criminal actions by Peter Murrell, and of course that is been delivered by him by the deceit that he's perpetrated, by the falsification of information, the falsification of invoices, and all of that information has been conveyed to the court this morning, and it demonstrates exactly why this crime has been able to be perpetrated and why all of the normal safeguards that should work in these circumstances were not successful in that respect. So I think what this all demonstrates is an appalling breach of trust, and the courts will obviously decide on the further course of action that they take. For me, obviously I have come into office and I have strengthened the governance of the Scottish National Party so that members of the party are able to freely and openly express their views, that I've put in place the strongest level of financial control and financial insurance that I think is required, and that there is openness and transparency about the consideration of all financial items that are considered by the party, and the scrutiny that members of the National Executive Committee that are entitled to expect to be able to exercise is there for them to be able to exercise as they do. And lastly, what I would say is that this is obviously a very significant issue that commands a great deal of public attention, and I recognise that. But what I would say is that we've had an extensive police investigation that has established serial criminality and a whole range of different actions to cover that up. We have also, I have taken steps with my colleagues to strengthen the governance of the Scottish National Party, and in the aftermath of the election, the public will expect us to focus on their priorities and the issues they wish to see addressed in their society, and that's precisely what the Scottish National Party government is doing.
Do you think you'll get any of the money back?
Well, on that point, obviously there's legal processes now to be gone through, and as I said to, I think, Parliament on Thursday, that the Advocate Depute has made representations to that effect to the court already, and obviously the Scottish National Party as the victim will obviously have significant issues to consider in that respect.
Why was he allowed to sign off his own expenses in the first place?
I think what has been demonstrated here is that there has not been in every respect adequate controls in place at that particular moment.
So that was a failure of leadership?
The systems that were in place should not have been able to be abused, but they were. And that's the issue that we have addressed, and I'm satisfied that all of those controls are in place at this particular time.
What would stop this happening again?
The various steps that we've taken are such that any invoice, for example, any payment in the SNP has got to be seen by three pairs of eyes: the Head of Finance, the Chief Executive and the National Treasurer. So there are clear controls in place there at three levels. That's before anything gets presented to the National Executive Committee. The National Treasurer has also been directly empowered by me to scrutinise whatever he wishes. The Chief Executive of the party, who is line managed by the party's business convener, so not line managed by me, is also empowered to scrutinise whatever he wishes to scrutinise and has to provide assurance to the business convener about all of these issues. And the National Treasurer is obviously has direct access to me to raise any issues of concern or that require scrutiny. And then, of course, all of that financial information is openly shared with the National Executive Committee and is scrutinised by its members.
Mr Murrell has far too much financial freedom.
Well, I think I don't think it's quite as simple as that, Glenn. I think what's obvious is that systems were circumvented. There was falsification of invoices. So that was deliberately to disguise. There was falsification of invoices. There was miscoding of items that were set out. These are all steps to deceive. So it's not about having too much power. It's about abusing the systems that were in place and circumventing those systems that are in place. And that is, of course, at the very heart of embezzlement.
But it sounds like there weren't any.
No.
First Minister, it sounds like there weren't any systems in place. Isn't that the problem? I mean, when you became party leader, what did you find? What questions did you ask about all of this and about what had worked and hadn't worked in the past?
Well, what I wanted to assure myself about, and I have done so, is that we would have in place the most stringent levels of financial control in place to make sure, as I've just answered Glenn, that there would be multiple sites of individual transactions so that we could be assured that resources were being used wisely and effectively. So these are some of the steps that are necessary, and all of them have been put in place to make sure party members and donors can be confident about the use of their money.
But you must have been appalled when you became party leader that those systems weren't in place.
Well, what I've made sure is that the SNP has got, I promised the party the highest levels of governance. It's what people would expect of me, and that's exactly what they're getting.
Did you know Peter Murrell had so much control over the party finances that things were being checked?
Well, obviously not, because I've explained to many of you already that for 20 years I was not serving office bearer in the Scottish National Party. So I had no line of sight on these issues because I wasn't a member of the democratic machinery of the party other than being a participant at party conference. And I know I was a senior government minister for all that time, but I didn't have party responsibilities. But I think the answer to the question is important about what I've said earlier on. The systems that were in place were circumvented, they were undermined, they were the victims of falsification of information and miscoding of information to deceive. So the systems that were in place, which should have been effective in making sure effective management of finances, were undermined by somebody who acted in a criminal fashion. And that is, in my view, beyond reprehensible, but of course the courts have come to their conclusions on that.
People were ignored who raised questions. People were, to say the least, who were in charge were incurious. The systems where meticulous checking was supposed to be done by treasurers and auditors appears not to have found anything. I mean, it's really crap governance, if nothing else.
Well, we've now got very strong governance in
First
place,
Minister,
and I'm confident about that.
Last week you said that the systems didn't fail, the systems were bypassed. But today the narrative seemed to contradict that, and you seem to have accepted that today. Do you accept that statement you gave last week was, misguided?
No, I don't. And don't put words in my mouth, Mark. Don't do that, okay? I'm engaging in this in an open fashion. Don't put words in my mouth.
I'm sure that's verbatim what you said last week, First
Don't
Minister.
put words in my mouth. What I've just said to Matty is exactly what I said last week. The systems were robust, but they were circumvented by a criminal actor. So please don't put words in my mouth. It's not a fair
If
exchange.
Peter Murrell was in front of you today, what would you say to him, John?
Oh, Gina, I wouldn't know where to start. I honestly wouldn't know where to start. I can't adequately convey the sense of betrayal I feel, because I go about things, and you can make your own judgments about me, but I go about my political work with good intentions. I joined the Scottish National Party nearly 50 years ago because I wanted Scotland to be independent, and I believe that cause in my heart. And I've worked very hard alongside lovely people over many years to raise money, often small sums of money, which we rejoiced when we raised £100 at a coffee morning. And that's how I feel today. I feel absolutely gutted at the behaviour that has been perpetrated against decent, hard-working members of the party who just simply wanted to do their best for the cause, and they have been betrayed.
And you've known him a long time.
I have, and I'm utterly devastated.
John, senior figures in the SNP criticised the police investigation as a grotesque circus. The Crown Office has been called into question about the timing of the court cases. The Lord Advocate's position has been questioned about whether the arrangements we have for that are right. Surely there is a strong case for an independent investigation, probably a parliamentary one.
I don't think there's a case for that, because we have actually had a thorough and comprehensive police investigation that's lasted for many years and has resulted in a trial process being scheduled, which of course has been concluded at an earlier stage because of the guilty plea that has been offered, and obviously that's because of the compelling nature of the evidence that the police have put forward. And so the legal processes have taken their course. As for the timing of the hearings, well, as I said in answer to Polly McNeill last week, it's quite routine for preliminary hearings to be delayed. There was one delayed in February, and what we now know from the narrative is that quite soon after that, discussions began about the opening up of a plea of guilty at the preliminary hearing. So in my view, the legal process has worked.
Surely we should hear from the Crown Office on that, John, rather than you.
Well, the Crown Office, I think, made a statement last week in response to a press release from Russell Finlay, and I saw media lines from the Crown Office which made exactly that point, that this case was considered by senior counsel and by independent Crown Counsel within the Crown Office. The Solicitor General and the Lord Advocate, the law officers, were not involved in the handling of this case, and I think it's been a very comprehensive and clear outcome of the criminal process.
First Minister, the narration said that the main SNP bank accounts where Murrell stole from derived its income principally, but not exclusively, from members and donors. Was public money going through that account?
The only public money that would have conceivably gone through that account could be the policy development grant from the Electoral Commission, which is the subject of separate auditing, and you only receive the payments from the Electoral Commission if they are satisfied with the contents of those submissions. And there is nothing that has emerged from the police investigation that points to the fact that any of those resources were in fact utilised or misconstrued.
Do you know that the Commission relied on audits supplied by the SNP? We know that Murrell misled auditors.
Well, but there was a separate audit carried out of the policy development grant for the purposes of the Electoral Commission.
You are accepting that public funds may have been part of the general pool of money from which he stole.
I'm giving you a detailed answer to your question.
Conceivably could have been.
And I'd be grateful if you wouldn't put words into my mouth.
No, you
Because
say conceivably.
I've already remonstrated with one of your colleagues for putting words in my mouth, and I'm not going to have it. Okay?
How convinced or otherwise were you by Nicola Sturgeon's interview at the weekend?
Well, I think Nicola Sturgeon spoke to explain her personal situation about all of this. It's an incredibly difficult situation, and my duty is to set out the reaction of the Scottish National Party, and that's exactly what I'm doing.
Have you spoken to Nicola Sturgeon?
I spoke to her last Monday evening. I've not spoken to her since the weekend. Okay, right, thank you all very much. Thank you.